told you the crypto market cycle ends in October. We don't have a long time. By that time, you need to be out. And now I have to come clean. I have to admit that my assessment was completely wrong. It's not only me, it's other big names, Ben Cowan, Raoul Pal, and a whole lot of others. Everyone's been betting that this crypto cycle is following the other crypto cycle. And if that's true, then this crypto cycle would need to end in the next 8 weeks. When I look at the data though, it's telling me that this time is in fact different, and that there's no way that this cycle's ending in 8 weeks. If I'm right here, we're not talking about a 3-month extension to the bull market. We're talking about the ultimate ultra cycle that could last for a year and maybe even longer. I'm Crypto Man Run, and I've been around for all 3 crypto market cycles. I study data and I make videos that are designed to help you navigate the cycle and walk away with life-changing money. And this time, the data is telling me that there's a massive opportunity that no one else is seeing. I want to share this opportunity with you and a whole lot of other opportunities. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification. Because on this channel, you never know when a video is going to drop. And when it does, it could be the one video that makes all the difference. It's become the consensus trade of the cycle, the trade that everyone's betting on. And at face value, it actually has a lot of merit, and it's backed by a lot of data. The data says that crypto moves in 4-year cycles. The cycle begins with the Bitcoin halving, and it peaks about 1,050 days after the halving. In the last part of the cycle, we get the fun part. The part where the market explodes, the retail herd arrives, and altcoins outperform Bitcoin. After a long and tumultuous cycle, this is the part where all the money's made. And those that are experienced, well, they can identify this period. And what they do is they start selling their bags on the herd of retail investors. And when they do that, they make a lot of money. Those that don't, well, they'll end up holding the bags. And then they become long-term investors, or what we refer to as community members. But what if the consensus trade of the cycle was to exit, and then the cycle just carried on? For a month or two, those that sold would feel okay. But eventually the data would come in. And then they would realize that this cycle is actually different. They'd realize that this cycle is going to be a lot longer than they initially expected. And if that happens, they're going to rush in to buy again. They're going to buy the same tokens that they dumped on retail investors from the same retail investors. And when they do, that's going to cause the ultimate frenzy, or what I'm calling the ultimate ultra cycle. Let me show you the data. Let me show you why I think that this time is different and why I think we could get a much longer ultra cycle. Market tops are always the same. And that's because market tops aren't actually driven by fundamentals. They're driven by human emotion. And they always end up in a frenzy or in a blow of top. Just look at the end of the 2017 cycle. It was a crazy 100-day period when markets went up only. And as they did, they sucked in more and more people who were coming into crypto to make life-changing money. When they came in, the prices went higher, and that sucked in more people. And so the cycle perpetuates until the blow of top. That's when the bubble bursts and the market cycle ends. And that's how every market cycle plays out. I mean, just look at the dot-com bubble. The same run-up, the same short euphoric period at the end of a long bull market, and then the bear market. Market cycles are always the same. And if indeed market cycles are always the same, and we're 8 weeks away from the end of this cycle, well then, shouldn't we be seeing that euphoria or that blow of top? Because market topping is actually a process. It's not a single day. In 2017, it was a 100-day period where the markets went up only. In 2021, it was 140 days. That's 3 months. Surely if this cycle top is only 2 months away, surely by now we'd be seeing some signs of euphoria? Surely by now we'd be seeing some signs of the blow of top? Let's look at the data. The first data point is the simplest one. It's literally the fear and greed indicator. When markets top, you expect a sustained period where the fear and greed indicator is at extreme greed. Because that extreme greed is the magnet that brings in the new money and the new investors. In 2021, for example, we spent over 150 days in extreme greed territory before the cycle finally ended. In this cycle, we haven't even hit extreme greed. I mean, just look at where we are today. It's early September, and the index is hovering at around 49. That's neutral. We haven't even had a week of face melting euphoria. We would need the fear and greed to jump to extreme greed and to stay there for a number of months if we're about to get a cycle top. And well, if the alleged cycle top is only 2 months away, it doesn't make any sense. If anything, this indicator says that we're at least 4 to 6 months away from the end of the bull market, and that's the worst case scenario. The next piece of data that I'm looking at is the market cycle rotation. It's the flow of money in the crypto cycle. And every crypto cycle follows the same pattern. First, Bitcoin runs, then people rotate their profits from Bitcoin into ETH, and then from ETH to the large cap alts, and finally the small cap alts. When we hit the small cap alts, that's when you get the true face melting alt season. So where are we on this map? Well, we just completed phase 1, the Bitcoin phase, and the handover to Ethereum hasn't even happened yet, let alone the move into the altcoins. To give you perspective, in 2021, the rotation from Bitcoin to ETH started about 10 months before the end of the cycle. That's when ETH broke $1,400 and went to its previous all-time high of $4,800. 10 months is plenty of time for money to flow to ETH, then to the large cap alts, and then to the small cap alts. We've just started the first part of the flow from Bitcoin into ETH. And if this cycle isn't different, then how will the money flow into the large cap alts and then the small cap alts in 8 weeks? It's not possible. In fact, this again points to a longer cycle. It could point to another 10 months or maybe even another year from here. Another data point I'm looking at is the Bitcoin dominance. Remember, the Bitcoin dominance chart shows how big altcoins are relative to Bitcoin. And in every cycle, when the alt season starts, the Bitcoin dominance falls off a cliff as people leave Bitcoin and fly to the altcoins for returns. In 2017, the Bitcoin dominance chart fell off the cliff in March, and the cycle topped 10 months later in December. In 2021, again, the Bitcoin dominance fell off a cliff in March, and the cycle ended, well, 10 months later. Now let's look at the Bitcoin dominance chart today. You can see that this chart is just falling off the cliff. It literally just happened. That would give us at least another 10 months of the cycle. Another super important signal if you want to know when the market's dangerously overheated is leverage. Because generally towards the end of the cycle, in the euphoric period, people tend to believe that the cycle is going to last forever. And when they do, they get comfortable taking leverage. You can see it in the funding rates. When we get market tops, we get extended periods where the funding rates are high. And when the bubble pops, that's known as the deleveraging events. Right now, funding is neutral. In fact, we haven't had heated funding for months. If this market cycle really is ending soon, surely we'd see it in the leverage. And right now, in the leverage, we're seeing nothing. So pretty much every crypto chart is telling us the same thing. It's telling us that the euphoria hasn't even started. And when the euphoria starts, we still have months until the end of the cycle, maybe even 10 months. Okay, so the on-chain data is clear and the crypto data is clear. And that data is telling us that there's no way that the cycle is ending in 8 weeks and that in fact, we may have 10 months left to go. But what about the macro environment? Because ultimately the macro environment is the ultimate driver for any market, right? In 2020, the bull market was started because the Fed was printing money in response to COVID. Then in 2022, when the Fed started tightening, that killed the cycle. Pretty simple. Bitcoin always follows the Fed cycle, and it peaks after the Fed has dropped rates and when the Fed begins to tighten. First rates drop, then Bitcoin runs, then rates tighten, and then Bitcoin drops. So where are we today? Well, today we're just on the verge of the easing cycle. In fact, the data is telling us that there's a 95% chance of the first real rate cut in September. And if we start cutting rates in September, we could forecast that rates would be reduced over a period, say at least a year period. That would give us at least another year of this bull market. there's no way the cycle's ending in 8 weeks. The last thing that I want to look at is global liquidity. Because it's not just about rates, it's actually about liquidity. I mean, we've all seen the famous M2 money supply chart and how Bitcoin lags this chart for a few months. Well, this chart's going up only, and there's no drop in the next 8 weeks. In fact, the data again shows that this should increase for another year before any major drops. The macro landscape isn't a headwind anymore. In fact, it's become a massive tailwind, which is going to extend the cycle, not compress it. So let's put it all together. I know some of the biggest names in the space are calling for the cycle to end soon, but the data isn't supporting that thesis anymore. You see, market tops are periods, and in these periods, certain dynamics need to play out for the market to top. You need sustained periods of euphoria. That sustained euphoria drives confidence. That confidence makes people rotate from Bitcoin to ETH and ETH to the altcoins. That rotation pumps the price of those smaller illiquid coins and drives greed and exuberance. That greed drives people to take more risk, and ultimately they take more leverage. And that's what ends the cycle. All of this takes time, way more than 8 weeks. And it can only happen under the right loosening macro conditions, which are just starting now. Guys, in my assessment, this cycle has to be different. It's going to be much longer, at least 12 months longer. And since it's powered by institutional flows and not retail flows, it's probably going to be way bigger. So I'm calling this cycle the ultimate ultra cycle, and it doesn't end anytime soon. It's changed how I view my portfolio, it's changed how I view my extra strategy, and it's changed the way that I'm trading. And I'm going to share all those changes right here on the channel, and they're going to be huge. So if you haven't already subscribed, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because a lot of things are going to change.